waters. As long as we have an economic system in which there is no incentive for industry to think long-term, to think sustainable, so long as industry can continue to use air, water, and soil as a toxic dump and not have to pay for that, there's going to be no incentive on the part of industries to be concerned about long-range effects. The driving force of the private sector today is only one thing: profit. Maximize profit in the shortest possible time. And it's very difficult then to get an industry that might do the right thing for your children and mine, but reduce that bottom line, which is the profit margin. And I think that until one reforms that, it's going to be very difficult to get industry off the direction, the path that they're on. So that we have to urge Mr. Martin, our government, to start using the whole taxation process in a more creative way. We have to get him to back off taxes on the things that we want. We want jobs. So he ought to back off taxing companies that pay salaries. We ought to back off people who get and make a living by earning money, back off personal taxes. But tax the things that are consuming the earth. Tax things that are contributing back to the air, the water, the soil, overconsumption. Tax frivolous things. And we ought to certainly stop what David Lewis many years ago called the subsidy of the corporate welfare bums. We are giving so much perverse tax incentives or credits to the oil industry, to the use of transportation. We ought to be putting that money into the things that will do well, like more energy efficient vehicles, into public transit, into alternate energy, and so on. We have been overrun with this kind of neoconservative notion of economics. Unfortunately today, in Canada, we've had an immense concentration of the media under a few very wealthy people. So the Conrad Black approach to the world is to push this kind of neoconservative notion of the way to go, and that's get government to back off and free the globe for the market forces, for the private sector. Well, this is absolutely destructive and suicidal. I find it astounding that we elect people to represent us, to look out for our best interests. And what do? They rush to become a part of a global economy. But the minute we're part of a global economy, we no longer have any hope of controlling it. So I remember vividly when Mr. Mulroney, when it was in his last year of his prime ministership, and he was on the Larry King show on CNN. And King said to him, well, Mr. Mulroney, your economic record doesn't look like it's that great. The economy isn't doing too well in Canada. And his answer electrified me. He said, don't blame me, it's the global economy. There's nothing I can do about that. And I thought, then what the hell are you doing trying to get free trade and NAFTA, for God's sake? That makes us even more helpless. So I say, in a democracy, we elect people to look out for our interests. And it's time for the Canadian public to get off the Conrad Black agenda and get into our children's agenda and say, get back to doing what we elected you to do. And that is to protect our economy for Canadians, not roll over and play dead to the transnationals in the global economy. Now that's a pretty tough order. But I think that the kind of groups like the Council of Canadians, there are groups now that are pressing to really get this global economy into a perspective that recognizes that local priorities have got to come before the priorities of the transnationals. Just because it's good for business does not in any way mean that it's good for us. Because good for business just means somebody makes a lot of money.
One of the strategies for dealing with pollution is to simply spread it out over a larger area. But will the process of dilution work in the long run?
If you look at Europe, of course, Europe is heavily populated. They've trashed most of their wilderness areas. They have very severe ecological problems, and necessity is forcing them to do the right things. Germany is very progressive in terms of whole life examination of products, from what they say cradle to grave, from the time you dig stuff out of the ground to the time you throw it back in the dump. And they're trying to get away from actually dumping it back into the earth and reusing and so on. They're having to do that of necessity. Canadians still have a mindset that this is a vast country with a small population. And I said at the time that I was fighting against free trade. And I was saying, why do the Americans, why do they care about free trade with a small country like Canada? What do we have to offer them? And I said, it's this vast area to dump their crap. And now I was interested to see recently that the announcement that under Mr. Harris, Ontario is importing vast amounts of toxic chemicals, which we're going to dump. So as long as we have this notion that Canada is so vast, we're going to continue to think, oh, well, it's no problem, build these mega dumps, and we'll just dump it in there and put it out in the air and the water, and it'll all go away. So I think right now we have the problem with the Canadian mentality, which is that we think that we have virtually infinite amounts of resources. The whole basis of testing of chemicals in our health system is by using animals and microorganisms as test systems. So I find it very strange if our determination of whether or not to allow chemicals to be used in the environment or to be consumed is based on whether rats get sick. Why is it then that when turtles or fish or birds start showing abnormalities, we're then told, well, don't worry about it, it's only those things, it's not humans. The fact is, those are our biological relatives. If you look at the DNA in turtles or trees or birds or fish, we have a lot of the same genetic material because we share common evolutionary history. We share the need for air, water, and soil. So if there are abnormalities in our biological relatives, then I think we damn well better pay attention to that. When you see abnormalities appearing in other creatures, they are the first line indications. And I've always felt, yeah, humans are really, we think we're so special, we're not going to pay attention to that. We're going to wait till we see it in us. Well, damn it all, we see it in us. We see it in our children, and our children have become the canaries in the coal mine. They now show levels of asthma, allergies, sensitivities that are absolutely epidemic proportion. And I say to people, well, what is it going to take to motivate us? Do our children have to start dying in the streets, for heaven's sake?
The workplace is really a microcosm of the general environment. Shouldn't we be paying closer attention to what's happening to workers? And shouldn't we be more concerned about their health?